You can hear them crying in Munich. Woltemade is here to win. One chat with Eddie Howe and he said, wow. I can't sing the rest of the song because it's in the first 30 seconds of the video and I'll get demonetized. But I am going to look in this video about why Isak is going to be absolutely useless at Liverpool without Jacob Murphy. So, it's been a pretty good week for Newcastle fans overall. We've beaten a team that's been unbeaten this season away in the Champions League 4-0. We've been on the receiving end from some very salty tears from the Bayern Munich chairman. And our new record signing striker is netting goals every week, whilst the one that was an absolute traitorous rat that went to Liverpool is still yet to register a league or Champions League goal. He has scored against Southampton in the cup though. So over the course of this video, we are going to cover the tears in Munich. We're going to cover the USG game. We're also going to cover why Isak is useless without Jacob Murphy. And I've got video footage to analyse as to why I think Isak will never be the player that he was at Newcastle at Liverpool. And then obviously we've also got Nottingham Forest this weekend, who are new to the Ange era.
It's just who we are, mate.
And I think that's a very interesting game, especially off the back of us finally having our attack seemingly click against Union SG. I think that could be a game that if we play our cards right, we could force the breaking of a major Premier League record this weekend. So stay tuned to find out about that as well. But before we get into all of that, please make sure you drop a like, hit subscribe, hit the bell if you haven't done all them things already. All of these things help massively support the channel. And one of the biggest things I hear on this channel from like my viewers and stuff is that I don't upload enough, and I would love to be uploading more. I love doing this. I love creating the content for you guys. I love being able to talk about things that I feel passionately about and, you know, just hear your guys' opinions on it and stuff. And as the channel grows, I am going to be able to give more content to you guys. And the channel has grown so much already, and I'm so grateful for all the support that's already been received. But for me to be able to give more content to you guys and to be able to kind of meet the demand that people want from me, I need the channel to grow more before I can put that level of time into the channel. I'm already putting a lot of time into the channel as it is, and for me to be able to put more time into the channel, the channel just needs to grow more. So if you want more content, then make sure you like, hit subscribe, hit the bell, and then I'll be able to give you more content. But with that said, let's get into the video. So, midweek, we went to Belgium. We came back with 3 points and 4 away goals in the Champions League. I know away goals aren't a thing anymore, but like, still good for goal difference. 4 goals in the Champions League. And to be honest, the most exciting thing was just that we're actually finally scoring goals. Now, these goals I don't want to get too carried away with. The same that I almost didn't want to get too carried away with the Bradford ones. I'm more happy to get carried away with these ones than I was the Bradford ones, because Union SG are undefeated this season. Well, were undefeated this season and did batter PSV as well the week before. So Union SG are a good team, and they are a much higher level team than Bradford. The reason, although they are undefeated, I can't get too carried away with it, is because if you look at the quality of their players on paper, they are still, like, if you look at the transfer market value, and I know it's not a great metric to look at as to determine whether a team is good or not, but if you look at their transfer market value for their entire squad, it's about 76 million. For reference on that, Sunderland's is about 290 million. So we have to take into account the fact that the level of these players is significantly lower than that in the Premier League. Probably not that much lower than them numbers would have you believe, because I think as soon as a player goes into the Premier League, his market value goes up just by being a Premier League player, and like quite significantly as well. So the actual level between like a Sunderland and a USG might not be that drastically different, but we have to take into account the fact that one squad is worth 300 million and the other is worth 75. So we have to take that into account. You know, we have to take into account the fact that, you know, when we are going up against, like, you know, Arsenal that we did the week before, like, it doesn't mean that we're now going to be still free scoring in the way that we maybe had been previously, because we still do have an attack that is still new. It is still finding its feet a little bit, but it looks closer. It looks closer to that point of kind of adapting, finding its feet, getting all the new signings bedded in. And the way that Alanga looked, the way that Woltemade looked in that game, Gordon still looks a bit off. I know he scored 2 penalties, but still his touch doesn't look amazing. His shot hasn't been great, but took the penalties really well, so I can't complain with that overall. But the reason I'm kind of back to being positive, and I know I'd been negative in the past few videos and the past few weeks, the reason I'm kind of back to being positive after that USG game is because right now we have the best defense in the Premier League. That's a given. That statistically we do, right? Then everyone knows over the past sort of like few seasons that we have been in contention, whether you want to say we do have the best, we have been in contention for best midfield in the league. Obviously there is some other great midfields in the league. You got Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, like there's some other top quality midfields in the Premier League, but we are up there in contention with them for best midfields in the Premier League. And then this season, the only thing that's really been missing has been our attack. And as I just mentioned, we've made new signings. Like we are, we've sold Isak. So there's been a massive period of change and a massive, the players have had to massively adapt their style of play because Woltemade is nothing like Isak as a player. But what's really exciting is how much more he brings than Isak overall, because not only can he score headers because he's 6'7" and we've now seen him score headers, and we very, very rarely saw Isak score headers, but his link up play, his hold up play, like the players within our team can just drop the ball into him in almost any position and they have ultimate confidence that he's pretty much always going to come out with the ball. Because as I said in the last video, it's like Messi on stilts. You cannot, not only is he massive and can just hold players off everywhere, but you just can't, the ball sticks to his foot like fucking glue. And the way that he can use that ability, players can kind of just drop the ball into him in like high pressure situations and he can come out of it with the ball, and then, the wingers can run off him and he can lay the wingers straight through. Like that was something that Isak sort of had in his game, but not to the level that Woltemade does. Like Woltemade is incredible at that. And I think once the wingers and the midfielders sort of learn Woltemade's game and learn kind of how it works a bit better, I think it's going to be a very, very fruitful attack. And I think that genuinely, looking at what he has in his game so far, like I don't think I've ever seen a player like Woltemade. Find me another player that can do what he does. I don't think there is. And for that reason, it could be very, very exciting, because it is very, very likely that he could completely surpass anything that Isak did at Newcastle, which obviously makes it very funny what we heard midweek from Carl Rumer. I'm not going to say the last part of his name because it'll probably end up getting my video demonetized or cancelled or something, because, the auto-generated captions might pick up the wrong words. So Bayern Munich's chairman decided to go about his business in a very kind of bitter way, commenting about Woltemade and Newcastle. And first of all, I mean, Anthony Gordon's already said it, like, kind of what the fuck has it got to do with him? Like, it's kind of just baffling that he's talking about him on any level. Like, you were the ones that weren't willing to pay the money for him. Bearing in mind, it was only £64 million. Like, it's not that much for someone who's already scored every week so far. So consistently he's just making Bayern Munich look like idiots, but especially when their chairman comes out and says stuff like that, because that just makes them look like an absolute laughing stock. And all it's done for me is it's made me think a little bit about my appreciation for Eddie Howe, because we have Eddie Howe, like the summer that Eddie Howe had, like it was a very, very hard sort of summer for him to deal with in terms of the media. And there was loads of questions that could have tripped him up so many times. And he did us proud in every single one. And he consistently does. Like within the media, he's always so professional, so calm, so composed, so like respectful of, other clubs, of other, of his own teammates, of his own players. Like he's just a genuinely like credit to the club with the way he handles himself in the media. And then seeing Bayern Munich's chairman, who's in theory in a much higher position than Eddie Howe, coming out and speaking in that kind of way, like, it's just embarrassing. It's embarrassing as a Bayern Munich fan to have your chairman coming out and giving these sort of like bitter kind of comments about players that aren't even yours. And what I can't quite understand more than anything is how someone who has worked their way up to be the chairman of one of the biggest clubs in the world is coming out and speaking like a fan almost. Like to become the chairman of one of the biggest clubs in the world, you have to have made a lot of very well calculated, good, professional decisions throughout your life to lead to that point. And then to be coming out and speaking in a way like that is just pure kind of embarrassment for your club. And it kind of just makes you a laughing stock, especially when Woltemade is scoring every week and just kind of adding fuel to the fire. Like I just can't understand how someone who has worked up to a position where they are higher than Eddie Howe in terms of professionalism has not even an ounce of the professionalism that Eddie Howe does. Like, I can't understand it. I genuinely can't understand it. Like, I'm just a fan, so I don't have to be professional. So I have kind of free reign to be able to come out and say stuff like that. But even I am aware that if I was in a professional role like that, that would not be the way to handle myself. I can handle myself like that because I'm just a fan. But he's speaking as if he is just a fan. Like it makes no sense. Like obviously as the saying goes, and I think it's maybe Spider-Man or Batman, something like that, with great power comes great responsibility. He has a lot of power as the chairman of a club, so he also has the responsibility to kind of talk in a, way that at least paints the club in a good light. And it's as if for him, he's just sort of like completely forgotten that and just been like, even though he does have a lot of power as a chairman of one of the biggest clubs in the world, he's like, yeah, well, I don't care about the responsibility side of it. I'm just gonna, almost act as if like I would with someone who has no power whatsoever. He's just speaking as a fan. And I'm like, You can't do that. You can't speak in a way that just makes your club a pure laughingstock when you are the chairman of your club. Like, if there's any Bayern Munich fans watching, let me know what you think of this, because you must be absolutely fuming with him. Like, it almost reminds me of the days of, like, I know he wasn't our chairman, but it also reminds me of the days of, like, Steve Bruce, where he'd just come out in interviews near enough every week and just embarrass us every single week, or, you know, like the Joe Kinnear days or something like that. Like, it's just always stuff that was just pure embarrassment every week, and Bayern Munich fans must be feeling like that. So I've sort of got to empathise with them on a certain level, because we've been there. We know exactly how that feels. But yeah, anyway, back to the USG game quickly before we get into the stuff about Isak and Jacob Murphy and why he's useless without him. So before we get into that, I want to talk about some of these standout performances from the USG game, because although I've talked a lot about Woltemade, I don't think his was a majorly standout performance. He was great, but I don't think it was a majorly standout performance. The two that I really want to cover are Elanga, although I don't really want to cover that in detail. He was just an absolute nightmare for defenders. The one that I really want to cover in a level of detail is Malick Thiaw, because he was incredible. And I actually got a message from one of my mates whilst I was watching the game. He's an Arsenal fan, and he messaged me saying that at some point Barcelona or Madrid are going to come in for Malick Thiaw because he looks that level of like elite. And I said eventually, probably, because when I look at it, obviously I think Madrid have been quite interested in Saliba, and I see Malick Thiaw looking very much in the mould of a Saliba kind of centre back. And so that's what I said to him. As I said, he's an Arsenal fan, and he was like, no, I see him looking a lot more like a Van Dijk kind of player, which is not quite the same size of player as Van Dijk. But the point is, for me, a fan that's not a Newcastle fan, already watching Malick Thiaw without that kind of, you know, like black and white glasses sort of like bias, and for them to be messaging me saying he looks like a Van Dijk Saliba level player, like that's very exciting. And based off of the few games he's had for us so far, like, you can't argue against it, because he looks so incredibly composed and just so solid as a centre-back. So yeah, Malick Thiaw looks very exciting, and I think that partnership with Sven Botman, Malick Thiaw, I think that is just going to be an absolute rock of a defence for the rest of this season. And I think that it's very sad almost, because you kind of see Dan Burn being sort of pushed out of the team, and as much as I love Dan Burn, that's the one kind of criticism that I had to a certain extent from the Union SG game. And it's not because Dan Burn is a bad player or anything like that, but what I want to kind of point out is that Dan Burn being moved out to left back, like when Lewis Hall came on, he looked great. And I think what I'm trying to say here is that our best team, it has to have Lewis Hall in over Dan Burn at left back, because as much as Eddie Howe probably doesn't want to drop Dan Burn, and I almost don't, because I absolutely love the guy, but when Dan Burn last played at left back, that's when he was getting majorly criticised. That's when we played against, I think, Luton it was at home. He got absolutely burnt for pace from like the first minute onwards against Ogbene, like, and it happened multiple times over the course of that season. And back then, Dan Burn was becoming a bit of a scapegoat. Since he moved to centre-back, he wasn't as much of a scapegoat, but unfortunately he's just not as good as Botman. And I think what he needs to be is a really, really, you know, great level kind of rotation centre-back. But Botman and Thiaw have to be the centre-back pairing, and Lewis Hall, realistically, I think, has to be the left-back. And I think the more Dan Burn plays at left-back, it's just going to be the exact same as what happened last time when he was playing at left-back, and he was just getting criticised every week. And it's not that he put in a majorly bad performance against Union SG, obviously not, we didn't concede a goal, but he did get burnt for pace a few times at left-back, and it's just, if you're putting Dan Burn up against pacey wingers who are trying to beat him, like, that's not where he thrives. I just don't think he is a left-back. He can play there, and he can, you know, kind of do a job there, but it's not his best position. His best position is centre-back. And when we have a left-back with the quality of Lewis Hall, I think he just has to be starting. But anyway, moving on from the USG game and how great Woltemade is, I almost don't want to talk about him, because I'm sick of talking about him, but at the same time, I think it's, in this instance, in this scenario, it's quite entertaining to talk about Alexander Isak and how we've bought Woltemade for 64 million, a million more than we paid for Isak, but almost half the price that we sold Isak for, and Isak has gone to Liverpool, scored one goal in the cup, and just generally looks like he's struggling to make any kind of impact at Liverpool whatsoever, whilst Woltemade is scoring every week. So the reason I want to talk about it is because there was a moment that I noticed in Liverpool's game with Galatasaray, which for me was quite a sort of like indicator that Isak, I don't think he's ever going to do as well as he did at Newcastle at Liverpool. So I'm going to play you a little bit of footage here and watch closely Isak's movement in this little passage of play here. Because if you see here, the ball comes in from the left over Isak's head to Conor Bradley. And if you look, Isak peels off from the defender, ready for the drop down. He's looking for the player that's coming in at the back post to attack that ball, to have a kind of unselfish view of it and to knock it down to him. So obviously in this situation, it's the right back, it's Conor Bradley. Quite often it's also going to be the right winger, so that'll be Salah. You know, maybe sometimes it's going to be Frimpong if he's playing. But obviously in this instance, it results in nothing. Now, if you you look at a very, very, very similar clip that Liverpool fans are going to remember very well, if you watch Isak's movement again in this clip, it's the exact same movement, but the only difference in this clip is that the ball doesn't come into a Conor Bradley, it doesn't come into a Mohamed Salah, it doesn't come into a Frimpong, it drops into a Jacob Murphy. And the way that Jacob Murphy plays, he doesn't think the same as any right-sided attacker for Liverpool, because the right-sided attackers, or for Liverpool, and generally most of the attackers for Liverpool, they're all quite generally sort of selfish. It's not that they don't ever assist and they don't ever pass, they do pass, but a lot of them are looking for the goal themselves. Conor Bradley in this instance, you know, Salah is the main goal scorer for Liverpool. You might get a slightly less selfish approach from Frimpong maybe, but the difference is Jacob Murphy is one of the most selfless players in the Premier League. And to be honest, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Isak will eventually thrive at Liverpool. Maybe he'll be able to adapt his game to eventually work to the way that Liverpool play, rely less on kind of the service from Jacob Murphy, because the other side of it is Isak is actually a very quality, very technically gifted player, and there is a lot to his game where he will be able to, you know, adapt his game to potentially be able to thrive at Liverpool as well. But looking at it right now, what we know for certain from how he was at Newcastle and the way that Liverpool play, the goals that Isak got at Newcastle, like he is really gonna have to adapt his game if he wants any chance of being able to match that at Liverpool. And I guess at this point, only time will tell if he's going to be capable of doing that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Isak's eventually going to start thriving at Liverpool, or do you think that he really is just too reliant on Jacob Murphy, and without Jacob Murphy, he's just never ever actually going to hit the kind of heights that he did for Newcastle at Liverpool? Let me know what you guys think, because I want to hear your opinion on it as well. And then that brings us finally to this weekend against Nottingham Forest. Now, doing a general preview for this game against Nottingham Forest is quite hard because it's a very new team for Nottingham Forest. Obviously, they're very new to the Ange era. Ange hasn't really been playing fully how he did at Spurs, and he hasn't had the majorly high line that he did at Spurs. There has still been elements of the high line, but it's still very, very early in his tenure that he's probably still working that system in. But what I do find very interesting for this game is, obviously, as I mentioned earlier in the video, we've just come off the back of finally looking like our attack might be about to click. And all the stuff that's been coming out midweek about kind of where Nottingham Forest are and where Ange is at Nottingham Forest, like Marinakis has come out and said that if results don't improve very quickly, he won't hesitate to get rid of Ange. And then already there's Forest fans thinking, no, this is not the guy. I don't think many of them wanted him to come in the first place. There was a lot of kind of like questions about the sacking of Nuno. And off the back of that, we could genuinely be in a situation this weekend where if we, you know, if our attack has clicked as it kind of looked like it had against USG, if we go out against Nottingham Forest and we batter them and we beat them 4-5-0 or something like that, if that does happen, that could be the end of Ange at Nottingham Forest already. That's a genuine possibility, and that will break a Premier League record, because the shortest amount of time a permanent Premier League manager has spent at a club is 40 days. And in them 40 days, in 2006, he managed 7 games for Charlton. And then to compare Ange's tenure at Nottingham Forest to that, Ange's tenure at Nottingham Forest, on the day of the Newcastle game, he will have been there for 26 days, and that will have been his 4th game. So if he is genuinely sacked the next morning after the Newcastle game, that will be day 27 of his tenure. He will be almost 2 weeks breaking the record for the shortest amount of time spent as a permanent Premier League manager. And I think we all know, if the chairman of any club is going to break a record for sacking a manager in the shortest amount of time, Marinakis is going to be that chairman. Obviously, we have had a bit of bad news going into this game, that Wissa's injury has now been set back a little bit longer. He was never going to be back for this game anyway, but it's still just not ideal to know that we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to see Wissa. And then maybe about a month after he actually comes back, he goes off to AFCON as well. So it's not really looking like a great signing at the moment. And it is looking very much like we are relying largely on Woltemade. And it's not looking like a bad thing, because Woltemade is absolutely smashing it. But it's obviously not great that Wissa is now injured for longer and then going to be going to AFCON very shortly after as well. The positive, though, is Jacob Ramsey is ahead on his recovery. Unfortunately, Tino is out for apparently about 10 weeks. But yeah, very excited for this Nottingham Forest game, and I think it's going to be quite entertaining if we can put 4 or 5 past Forest, and we do start to potentially see the chance of getting sacked in the morning, potentially only 4 weeks into a manager's tenure at a club. Like, that is crazy. So with that said, let me know your predictions for the Nottingham Forest game for another £50 Google Play gift card giveaway. Let me know your score prediction and first goal scorer prediction as a reply to the pinned comment as usual. All details will be in the description, and thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.